Good afternoon, friends, and shalom, and welcome to this episode of the Watchdog exclusively on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times, and I have got a lot of good actually from today's episode. Now, not all good. There was some disappointments today that we're going to have to discuss, but I am I'm happy, I guess, with at least some of the stuff and how it's going. We're gonna obviously get to everything I'm talking about, but the headliner that you guys can see, very exciting for me. Didn't know if it was gonna happen. Turned out it did happen. We got a lot to talk about as a result of it, and I'm super stoked to actually see something like that occur. But nonetheless, want to go ahead and get to some channel housekeeping here real quick. So, first things first, this is Saturday. We don't usually post these episodes on Saturdays. They're typically posted Tuesday and Thursday. The reason we are posting this today is because I was going to be content leaving my conversation with Michael the Canadian Atheist as the second video we had up on this channel. And then this breaking news occurred. And I wanted to talk about this as fast as I possibly could. I was at work when it occurred. Um, this is the first opportunity I have to actually talk about it. And so, yeah, that's why we're doing this episode on a Saturday. I appreciate any of you guys who are here, despite the fact that there's little to no warning. Um, Besides that, I want to say please do like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. And by the way, again, typically when we go live, it is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Anybody who has any questions or anything of that nature, please tag me at the Synagogue News, and I will collect all questions and answer them at the end. We don't typically get many, if any, at all. So definitely ask knowing that it will be answered. Obviously, at some point in time, hopefully we'll be getting so many questions that we have to leave some by the wayside. That's a good problem to have, right? But as of this point in time, we typically get little to none at all. So definitely feel free to ask there. And of course, no pressure either. Just something I want to do to make sure we're having a little bit more interaction with the audience, and also that, to make sure that I'm not actually leaving the, conversation that I'm having here, my little monologue, and moving to whatever point or question has been brought up in the live chat, right? I can just collect them all and put them, in a little safe keep, I guess, my little notepad here, right? And then we get to them at the end. So yeah, be sure to ask those questions if you guys want to. Also, if you like this channel, please do consider subscribing to the Synagogue on Rumble. Rumble is a alternative, I guess not social media, right? It's an alternative video sharing platform, I guess is what these are probably called. But nonetheless, it is like your free speech YouTube. And I definitely want to make sure that we are consistently posting there. On top of that, I do think at some point in time, a lot of episodes do have the liability to actually get censored here on YouTube. So not only do we want to make sure we're posting consistently onto Rumble so that we can help them actually become a legitimate platform, but also we want to make sure we have that backup just in case we do end up getting censored over here on YouTube. So if you guys do have a Rumble account, please consider subscribing to your boy. And if you don't have a Rumble account, please consider getting one. Sorry about that. Please consider getting one. And then, of course, subscribing to your boy. I would certainly appreciate that. Also, you can find me on any of the social media platforms which you frequent. Please get this video shared to those platforms. And you can follow me there if you fancy. I am found by the tag name The Synagogue on any of the channels that we have been mentioning so far. So Rumble, Gab, Parlor, Minds, Twitter, Facebook, at the Synagogue. You'll be able to find me. I frequent some more than I frequent others, but nonetheless, certainly do appreciate you guys if you're there. Also, definitely want to make sure you're on alternative social media platforms like Gab and Parlor in order to try and take back internet free speech. Remember that internet free speech is not something that we can ask the government for help for, because then we're actually getting the government involved in speech that they are not involved in. Instead, we want to use the market to our advantage. And the way you do that is by using platforms which are willing to make sure your speech is defended, which are willing to provide you a public platform for discourse, provided that you're not, directly harassing or inflicting violence on somebody, right? And Gab, I think, does definitely do that. Parlor definitely does that. Rumble definitely does that. Minds definitely does that. So definitely consider getting on those channels, and in effect, kind of delivering a little bit of a gut punch to the Twitters, YouTubes, Googles, and Facebooks of the world. Hashtag not spawned, by the way. um, what else do we have? Is that it? No. If you guys want to help contribute to this channel, um, financially, I mean, you can do so by giving either to the Patreon, which is a subscription-based service where you can give any amount of money that you see fit. I do not do tiers or anything of that nature. Um, or you can give to the PayPal, which is a money giving service that allows you to give one time. And again, no tiers. You can give as much or as little as you like. I ask that you give with trepidation. Please only give if you think that this is a good show, if you think that it deserves to be out there in such a way that I am actually doing this as a career, not working a day job, a real job, as some of you guys might say. The kind of job I work now, right, and have worked since I've been 16. Man, it's kind of weird to think of it working for 8 years already. Anyways, that's completely irrelevant to what we're talking about. Yeah, if you guys want to give there, please do consider doing so. I greatly appreciate you. And of course, you know, like I said, give with trepidation, make sure you're not financially harming yourself, yada yada, so on and so forth. That is the end of our excuse me. That is the end of our channel housekeeping. So I want to briefly discuss before we get to our articles two world leaders who could be very near death, and what I think, actually three, and what I think that could mean for the rest of the world. Okay, so the first one is frequent flyer on this channel, not literally, of course, because we've never actually talked to him or anything like that, but in the sense that we talk about him a lot. That's Pope Francis. Pope Francis is getting older. His body is breaking down. It does appear like the church is getting ready to um, elect his successor. And of course, how long he has, we don't know. We obviously wish death upon nobody, or ailments or anything like that. I am not in any way, shape, or form a friend of the Pope. Um, but of course, I still do wish to see, I mean, he's a human being, right? And I do wish to see human beings prospering. I do wish to see human beings living long lives. I do wish to see human beings living lives dedicated to God, specifically Jesus Christ. Obviously, I have major disagreements with the Pope as far as how he does that. I even disagreements that would go as far as to say the way he does it is not legitimate. I don't think that as a Catholic that you are a Christian, right? I know it's a very controversial thing to say. That's something that I think is probably more a topic for my other channel, but nonetheless, it's true. That said, again, you know, still don't like to see people dying. It's just not one of the things I enjoy, right? I mean, for crying out loud, I don't even like to see people executed. And obviously, I believe in the death penalty. I think that kind of thing has to happen. But nonetheless, the point is, even somebody who's committed some egregious crime, I'm not like, ooh, he giddy and joyful, and I think that's the way we should be. But nonetheless, the church is currently talking about Pope Francis's replacement. Um, Francis has sort of stacked the College of Cardinals in such a way that 73% of all voting cardinals will actually have been Francis appointees. And so, what that means for the future is that if Francis does end up passing here soon, whoever his replacement is probably going to be significantly, more Franciscan in meaning, like him, not in the traditional sense of Franciscan, than he is, right? Potentially a lot more progressive than he is, potentially a lot more ecumenical than he is, potentially a lot less willing to adhere to the traditional Catholic doctrines or biblical doctrines than he is. And we've all already had a lot of problems with his ecumenism, with his willingness to work with evil governments for the sake of increasing the influence of the Catholic Church, and of course many Catholics even have too, right? Cardinal Joseph Zen, Dr. Taylor Marshall immediately come to mind. But that is, I think, the biggest potential impact of a Pope Francis passing is everything that he's been doing. He'll be putting into the hands of somebody obviously younger and probably far more progressive than he. Who exactly that would be, I don't really have any idea, to be honest with you. I haven't done much reading on the potential successors quite yet, but I do know who the voting populace in this particular election would be. And so I can have like a general idea of what direction they'd want to go as far as being, big on the Abrahamic, union. I guess is the only really way you could put it. But that linking of Muslims and Jews and Baha'is and Christians under Father Abraham, big on that ecumenism that is going on between the World Council of Churches and the Catholic Church, as well as the Orthodox churches and the Catholic Church. In other words, trying to reunite Christendom. Big on things like the World Alliance of Religions for Peace, which brings all the non-Abrahamic, non-monotheistic religions into the fold. Big on climate change, big on leaving traditional areas of conflict like abortion, homosexuality, divorce, big on potentially changing the role of women in the church, et cetera, right? Again, 73% of the voting population for the uh, of the College of Cardinals, right? Which I believe you have to be under the age of 75, but of upper some age. I'm not sure what the upper age is, but I believe it's also under the age of 75 is a big point. 73% of the voting Cardinals are going to be Francis appointees, right? So that is just potentially going to be the biggest impact of Francis passing, is the church lurching forward in a much more Franciscan manner. And again, I mean that in the sense of following after him, not in the sense of following after Francis of Assisi, right? So he's the first world leader who appears to be close to passing. The second one is Vladimir Putin. There are numerous reports coming out that Vladimir Putin may have cancer and quite debilitating cancer. There have been videos out of him kind of shaking, looking pale, all this other kind of stuff. Now, how much of this is propaganda because people don't really like Putin and there's a war going on, and how much of this is actually true, I have no idea. It's hard to find Russian news, and so it's hard to find their perspective on these different things. Not impossible, to be perfectly clear, right? It's not like Russian news is illegal, but like if you could go on Google and look up Russia Today or Sputnik, right? They really don't want you on those channels right now because of the current conflict. Also, Russia Today is technically a state-run news organization. Now, of course, I can get Vatican state news and Chinese state news, no problem. So, there's a little, not a Putin fan. I'm just saying there's a little bit of hypocrisy there. But I digress on that issue. It does look like it's possible Vladimir Putin might be dying. And if Vladimir Putin is dying, how could that potentially affect the world? Well, that really, first off, depends a lot on his mental state, right? Is he, you know, I'm going down and hell's coming with me kind of thing? Or Earth's going down with me, probably be a better way to put that. The point just being, is he the type of person who wants to go out in a blaze of glory? And, is that what Ukraine is even about? Maybe, right? Is he willing to use nuclear bombs to achieve this? Is he willing to use bombs which are not nuclear but still highly destructive, like the FOAB, father of all bombs? I don't know what its actual name is, but that's the slang name we've given it. I don't know. I don't know. Chemical weapons, I don't know, right? We'll see. And how does that escalate beyond that, right? Of course, the other major impacts that a Vladimir Putin death could have is uh, potential potential liberation, but certainly power vacuum in Russia. Um, for those of you who do not know, I know we all kind of have this general idea that Vladimir Putin has been president for a long time, right? Um, but for those of you who don't know exactly how long it is that Vladimir Putin has been in power, his first stint as president, excuse me, of the nation of Russia was 2000 to 2008. This second stint has been going on since 2012, excuse me. So 2000 to 2008, and then so far since 2012, which is a decade running, plus that 8, that's another 18. And a year before his first stint, and in the 4 years in between his two stints, he was also the Russian prime minister. So Vladimir Putin has been in power in Russia since 1999, pretty much consecutively. Um, 23 years, right? That's Bill Clinton presidency, at least a year of it. I guess that'd be 2 years of it, but I digress. That's the Bush presidency. That's the Obama presidency. That's the Trump presidency. That's everything that has existed thus far in the Biden presidency, right? So definitely a pretty massive power vacuum if he does end up passing away here soon. How exactly that power vacuum is going to be filled, I am not really sure at the moment. I do plan to do a little bit of study on that, and give you guys a more solid idea of who his potential replacements could be, what their political ideologies are, how this will impact the war in Ukraine. Um, but just initially, having read very little on these reports, I can say that this is something that's concerning considering the fact that he decided to start a war now, right? It makes me wonder why he's starting this war. It makes me wonder if he wants to play hero for the Russian people or something like that. And also, I do think it's incredibly important for us to note that this will be a major, major power vacuum if Putin does pass away. Um, if you really want to get technical, Putin is the second leader of Russia since the USSR has fallen. Now, you could argue about that, right? You could argue, for example, about Dmitry Medvedev, who was the president in between his um, in between his excuse me, his two different stints, right? I mean, he was a leader, a president of Russia for 4 years. You could kind of say, you could, ask questions about the different prime ministers and stuff like that. But really, if I mean, it's a little bit oversimplified, but it isn't really too oversimplified to say since the USSR has collapsed, the leaders of Russia have been Boris Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin has, at this point, tripled the amount of time that Boris Yeltsin actually was president. Um, so, whether or not this again is true, I don't know. Again, I don't, we don't wish death upon anybody. Hopefully, Vladimir Putin sees impending mortality as a reason to change and become a better person and a better ruler. I don't know how any of that'll work, of course, but the point is, he is our second leader who appears to be very near death. And then the third one is actually King Mohammed, not King Mohammed bin Salman, excuse me, King Salman, um, Mohammed bin Salman, his father, right? He was born in 1935. He is already, incredibly old. I believe his birthday is December 31st. So at this point, he would be, I think, 87, going on 88. He has effectively been a figurehead for basically his entire reign. So this shouldn't have too huge of an impact. Really, the only impact that the death of King Salman in Saudi Arabia would have is that rather than pretending to be the crown prince when he's actually the king, Mohammed bin Salman would actually be designated the king, which he is. For all acting purposes, he is absolutely the king there in Saudi Arabia, and he's not a very good one, by the way. He is very politically savvy. He's willing to be progressive in areas that don't actually matter, like, hey, we'll let women wear bikinis and let you drink alcohol at this resort off the coast of Saudi Arabia. But are we, going to do anything about our persecution of Christians or rape victims? No. Are we going to open up relations with Israel? No. Are we going to stop bombing the Yemenis? No. Right. So Mohammed bin Salman, he's very talented in that sense, right? He's good at getting people to support him and think he's progressive because he knows how to turn on their pleasure receptors, I guess, with inconsequential legislation that in the end doesn't really matter. I don't know if you can call it legislation if it's a king, but nonetheless, not very good at doing things which actually lead to greater freedom and prosperity, not only for Saudis, but for those who are around Saudi Arabia. And so the impact, really, the only impact of King Salman passing away would be that we have to start calling him King Mohammed rather than Crown Prince Mohammed. which would just be the world being more honest anyways. He's the leader of Saudi Arabia, so I don't understand. I mean, I do understand, right? But I'm being coy here, tongue in cheek. Um, he's crown prince in name only is the point, right? He's crown prince in name only. So that's my pre-article discussion for today. Want to go ahead and get into my headliners. Very awesome news, very cool news. Praise the Lord for this news. Louisiana Supreme Court sides with Pastor Tony Spell and reverses the lower court's decisions. Yes, you heard that correctly, friends. The Louisiana Supreme Court sided with Pastor Tony Spell against Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards and has reversed the lower court decision. This is a very awesome change of pace. So far, Pastor Spell had lost nearly every time he had gone to court, including in his own lawsuit against Governor John Bel Edwards. It was dismissed because John Bel Edwards apparently has qualified immunity, which isn't really a surprise considering the fact that most politicians do. But nonetheless, yeah, huge news coming out yesterday. The Louisiana Supreme Court has decided, it took them like over a month to decide, but they have decided, and they have decided in favor of the plaintiff in this particular regard. I guess you would have to call him. Would he be the plaintiff? I don't know. Pastor Tony Spell is the point. Massive win for religious liberty. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared for you guys, friends, and we can all read along together. By the way, Kelvin Coelho and Cryptomaria, thank you both very much for being here. If you enjoy this, please do consider liking and sharing the video. And I think both of you are subscribed. But nonetheless, everybody else subscribe if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time we go live, blah, blah, yada, yada. Let's get the screen shared here. All right, Louisiana Supreme Court sides with Pastor Tony Spell and reverses lower court decision. This is originally coming from a local affiliate of, I believe, NBC. No, CBS. Local affiliate of CBS there in Louisiana. The article writer here is Allison Brule. Want to give credit where credit is due. And let's go ahead and jump right into the article. The Louisiana Supreme Court has sided with Pastor Tony Spell after reversing a lower court's decision. The ruling said that the governor's stay-at-home mandate was unconstitutionally applied to Pastor Spell. In 2020, Spell attracted national attention when he ignored Governor John Bel Edwards' COVID-19 stay-at-home order. Over 1,200 people reportedly attended Sunday service at Spell's Life Tabernacle Church as the pandemic first emerged. Now, the very interesting thing about that, I just want to note quickly, is that since this has occurred, I have been kind of keeping up with Pastor Tony Spell. I listen to him every now and then. I definitely listen to his legal updates. And I've gotten to know a little bit of the information about his church and what kind of church they are, what they do, the income they bring in, some of their staff, all that other kind of stuff. Typically, the church actually has something like 500 to 700 attending members. Very massive church. Very massive church. A lot of us are probably more used to churches with, 50-ish members, but this is certainly, a bigger church than that, right? But what the mandates ended up actually effectively doing is nearly doubling that to the 1,200 that they had just aforementioned, right? We have, I don't know how else to look at that other than kind of the hand of God in a way, right? They wanted to shut down his church. A bunch of churches did indeed comply and shut down their churches, and say, hey, no, we're not going to actually have services to you guys or for you guys unless it's something that's online or something like that, right? We all know, right? We were all here. Pastor Spell says, no, sorry. First Amendment says I have right to peaceably assemble. First Amendment says my right to exercise my religion shall not be infringed. We take necessary precautions, and we're not going to allow you to shut down our ability to worship. And what ends up happening? Well, the congregation nearly doubles or over doubles. I guess it depends on how you look at it, right? 1,200 is double 500, but not double 700. So kind of depends on how consistent that 500 to 700 is and around what number they are being consistent at. But I digress. Um, and effectively ended up getting enough money and ties to build a bigger church so that they could indeed accommodate these people because they're now regularly attending, which is one of the cool things I've noticed about Pastor Spell is the the tithing at his church appears to be going back to the community and back to the congregation. Not very many churches you see making that much money who are actually giving back in the way that he is, so I've appreciated that a lot. Anyways, just thought that was really funny and wanted to note it. Continuing on with the article. By the way, um, I know this isn't a question, which is actually why I'm not going to address it later, and I'm going to address it now. But this is the first time actually hearing of this, Cryptomarium. That is really cool, actually. If you can, send me a link to that. And my next episode, I'll talk a little bit about that after I read on it and get a little bit more information. But that is super cool. I actually had no idea. Anyways, appreciate that information. Let's get back to the article here. It's not the right article. There it is. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because I just noticed on my phone screen that it is very difficult to read for you guys. You can't really see it on the computer screen because I'm obviously in the StreamYard, right? Anyways, the Louisiana Supreme Court also ruled the charges against Spell, who was arrested for defying the mandate orders, quashed. Real brief note, those would have carried up to 3 years in prison and a $3,000 fine. Actually, no, sorry. I actually got corrected on this last time. Up to 4.5 years in prison and a $4,500 fine. So, I mean, you just think of the absolute absurdity that Pastor Spell could have been in prison 4.5 years for having church services open during the pandemic. That literally would have been the violation. The charge being defying a government mandate or something like that. But I mean, that was something that was on the board in Bible Belt, Louisiana. And that's the thing that always stunned me. Now I'm very, very happy to see that this didn't have to go to the Supreme Court. That's the difference, I guess, in being in Louisiana, is that this went to the Louisiana Supreme Court. It did not go up to the federal Supreme Court because the Louisiana Supreme Court squashed it before it could. Whereas in the case of John MacArthur or the Little Sisters of the Poor in New York, their courts are so pro-government, basically, that they have to actually effectively go all the way to the top, right? And so there is that positive. The negative, though, that shocked me about this is just how long it took, right? Pastor MacArthur and Little Sisters of the Poor were free from the government's intervention by March of last year, right? Pastor Spell, who's been doing this since March of 2020, is free from the government now, 2 years and 2 months later. I mean, that's outstanding to me that in the Bible Belt, Louisiana, that would actually be the case. It kind of lets you know that the Bible Belt isn't quite as Bible Belt as people think. It's not quite as conservative constitutionalist as people think, right? Those areas, Atlanta, Miami, New Orleans, that's Louisiana, a lot more big government progressive than we like to admit. The governor shared a statement Friday in response to the ruling. Quote, while the governor disagrees with the court's ruling and maintains that his orders were both necessary and lawful, he is accepting of it. Excuse me. He's referring to himself in the third person. That's super weird. Each and every action Governor Edwards took throughout the COVID pandemic, was done with the goal of protecting the public's health and saving lives. Governor Edwards has always recognized the importance of places of worship during COVID, which is why they were never closed while the public health emergency was in place. Now, this is just a fib. In fact, they certainly were shut down at least for 2 weeks entirely, right? In-person services were shut down entirely. But then eventually, when they were lessened, they were effectively shut down because you could only have, I believe, no more than 10 people. And then eventually, even then, when that got removed, it was no more than 15% capacity, right? And so both of those things are effectively shutting down for churches, especially when your church is 500 plus strong, right? If only 10 people can show up, that's basically the pastor staff. If only 15% of the population can show up, what's 15%? 75, I think, if I did my math correctly there, 75. Um, the point there being that this does effectively eliminate church services in any real way. And that's, of course, after the initial mandate, which had just said that they are to be shut down entirely, right? Everybody's churches are almost across the entire country, with the exception of South Dakota and Wyoming. Um, well, actually, also in Idaho, it was a localized thing, but like the city of Boise, for example, had a citywide mandate, but cities like Eagle and Nampa did not. Nonetheless, um, for the most part, all throughout the country, we had statewide mandates shutting down churches at least for 2 weeks, right? Because they weren't, quote, essential businesses. I don't know how a bar or a liquor store is an essential, or a strip club is an essential business, but a church somehow, I guess, isn't, even though it's the only one of those protected, literally protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. But I digress on that. This is just a fib coming from Governor Edwards, and he's actually quite proficient in fibs, so you might see another one coming. The governor worked closely with faith leaders throughout the pandemic, and all were encouraged to hold services as safely as possible to protect their congregations. And of course, that was the great excuse, wasn't it? By the way, if you were in a church that stayed home, if you're maybe even a pastor of a church that stayed home, I hope this isn't too insulting to you. I hope you can recognize why I feel the way I feel. But your capitulation to the state was effectively used against the rest of us. See, these guys do it. Why can't you? These guys shut down their churches. Why can't you? Right? And really, that is the biggest problem when members of the group start to go astray. And of course, I don't want to encourage group think, right? But I do think when it comes to something like defending our fundamental liberties to actually go to a church building and worship our Lord, it would seem to me like we should be united on that, right? In fact, I could even see, politically speaking, us not only being united with each other on that, but united with non-Christians on that, right? Like, in other words, I feel like if there's a Taoist temple around the corner, that I feel that the Taoist has every right to be there, and that the government has no right to shut him down. And me and him should be united in that. We shouldn't be united in much, right? I'm obviously not an ecumenist, but at least that little bit of political alliance, I think, is not only necessary, but it's just. Like, it's the kind of thing we should do. And yet we couldn't even agree amongst ourselves as evangelical fundamentalist Christians that what the Bible says explicitly should in fact happen. Namely, we should not forsake the fellowship of ourselves together. I just don't get it. I don't get it. And respectfully, guys, I hope you end up seeing it my way now, considering the fact that we're 2 years in the future, and they definitely use this as an opportunity to increase their already existing statist agenda. But I hope you guys see now just what it did to have you on the other side, to have you pastors and apologists and evangelists and congregants sit there and say, hey, look, I don't think what the Bible says about going to church really matters. We can just stay home. We can just listen to this, that, and the third online. You effectively became a weapon against the rest of us. And I'm just saying, consider that next time you make a decision like that. Anyways, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that rant was unnecessary to have here, but I feel like it was important to get off my chest. Fortunately, we have made great strides. This is back to the quote from Governor Edwards. Fortunately, we have made great strides since then, thanks to the safe, effective, and widely available vaccines, as well as other mitigation measures and therapeutics. But we must never forget the more than 17,000 Louisianans who have died from the virus, nor those who were either hospitalized or suffered serious illness as a result of it, end quote. You guys obviously know my views on each of the aforementioned, so you can see previous episodes of the Watchdog for that. Attorney General Jeff Landry issued a statement Friday afternoon reacting to the ruling, quote, once again, this governor's overreach has been defeated in court. While it is unfortunate that it took almost 2 years, I am appreciative that John Bell's unconstitutional orders, have been halted by the court. This is a victory for the separation of powers and our free exercise clause. What's more, it's a great highlight of John Bell's hypocrisy, punishing prayer service, but not food service at a mall, end quote. And Attorney Jeff Landry is somebody who has definitely gotten on my good side over the course of this Tony Spell conversation, but I digress on that. You can see, ladies and gentlemen, friends and saints, those who watch this and disagree, as well as those who agree. I don't know, I feel like friends and saints kind of referred to those who agree, but I have friends who disagree. We won! We won! We, as in Christians here, we, as in conservatives here, we, as in constitutionalists, those who believe in freedom, we won! How about that? I mean, I was stunned by this ruling. I really was. I did not think this was going to happen. I was very confident. You can see me in my previous episodes of the Watchdog saying this, that this was going to go to the United States Supreme Court. And it didn't. And it's one of those situations where, you know, sometimes when you predict a thing and you're wrong, it's like, man, guess I need to do better research and all that kind of stuff. Or, you know, I was looking forward to this happening. Or, hey, you know, whatever it is, there's a disappointment because you were wrong, right? Here it's like, woo, right? I'm down. I'm too down. This and the recent abortion thing, way too down to be wrong. Way too down to be wrong. But nonetheless, victory, and it is indeed very sweet. Pastor Spell will not be charged with any crimes. They will not be forced to give up any sort of financial capital. Retroactively, it has now been decided that they were unconstitutionally applied to them. These charges and fines, I mean. And Pastor Spell and his congregation will continue to go on with their spiritual lives without intervention from the government. So, major victory, I think, for religious liberty here. I want to listen to a small amount of Pastor Spell's reaction to this. He posted a 36-minute long video on YouTube. We're certainly not going to watch the whole thing. I'm not even going to watch half of it. Probably not even going to watch a third of it, to be honest with you. But I did want to give you guys a little bit of his own words on this. He obviously, was talking about this directly before, or directly after, it had happened and been announced. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get to that video here real quick. By the way, remember, friends, I know that there's not very many people in the live chat. It doesn't appear that we have much questions. But just in case you guys do have any questions, do remember to tag me at the Synagogue News, and I'll collect all questions at the end and try to answer them for you guys in a little Q&A there. Again, not trying to pressure anybody into having questions. I just want to make sure you guys are aware that you can indeed do that. All righty.
Hearings with Pastor Tony Spell after incredibly amazing victory that has happened. So you all see Pastor Spell. What we wanted to do is let you as well, church viewers, our global members, if you're watching, if you have a question for Pastor Spell directly, feel free to ask it. And he's going to talk a little bit about the case, about how he's feeling right now, about how his family is feeling, all of those good things. And feel free to share any questions you have for him, and we'll ask. So if you want to go ahead, Pastor.
So this morning, I was driving and I received a call from our attorney, Jeff Wittenbrink, and I answered the phone. He gave 2 words. He said, "You won." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." He said, "I can." He said, "I just stepped out of court to come and tell you that, so I'm going back in." I said, "Well, I was driving, and by the time I get 20 minutes down the road to where I was going, they had already heard about it in there as well. It had made the news. They were congratulating as well. So today is the day, number 1, of joy, victory, great peace, and hope in the Constitution of the United States, hope in the Bill of Rights, but also it's a day of vindication. For 27 months, the media has not been our friend. For 27 months, the political world has not been our friend. Law enforcement, executive branch, judicial branch, legislative branch, all of which we've suffered defamatory language towards us, very critical language toward us. So 27 months now, we've been vindicated by the highest court in the state of Louisiana. 7 Supreme Court justices One man gave a dissent, the Chief Justice. The others, tremendous wording in this over 20 pages, a 20-page document. I've gone through here and highlighted so much. One of them, no liberty is more essential than the continued vitality of the free society which our Constitution guarantees, than is religious liberty. 1931 Supreme Court Justice William Evan Hughes, he was also a presidential candidate for the United States. He spoke immortal words whenever he said, throughout the ages, men have suffered death rather than subordinate their allegiance to Almighty God over to the authority of the state. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to King Nebuchadnezzar in the plains that day, the furnace was heated 7 times hotter, but they stood. And since we said we were going to stand 27 months ago, they've heated up the furnace 7 times hotter, but now, as it did with them, it burned up the men that threw them in the furnace. Today, they've been burned up from the executive on down. And we're vindicated. To all of those of you who have supported us, we're very grateful that you have supported us. You've done so at the expense of grandparents being denied the right to see their grandchildren because they came to that church. Husbands not allowed to stay in the same bedroom with their wives because they come to that church. People excommunicated from families, terminated from jobs, drained financially, emotionally, mocked, ridiculed, scorned, misaligned, and abused verbally. Because you stood today, you are vindicated by the highest court in the state of Louisiana. This is a ruling that has set such great precedents, unlike the Catholic Archdiocese versus Cuomo, and unlike South Bay in San Diego, California. This is a pure religious win. On Hebrews 10:25, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Matthew 16:18, on this rock I will build my ecclesia, which means assembly, which is protected in the First Amendment, the right of the people to peaceably assemble, which is an inalienable right, which was God-given, therefore only God can take it. Among these that we're endowed by our Creator with. This picture on my wall is a very brave woman by the name of Rosa Parks. Sister Rosa Parks was a one God apostolic Jesus name tongue talker. Attorney Joe Long gave me that picture, and I framed it right above those first 6 arrests. And it says, you must never be afraid of what you are doing when you know it is right. She refused to move off of that bus seat, which was her seat, by the way. She was in the right place. She had moved to the back of the bus. She said, you know, I'm not giving you my seat today. And she won. We said to the governor, we said to law enforcement, we said to the political powers, scientific powers, we said, we're not moving. And because we didn't move, today is a great day for religious and civil liberties, the most fundamental and basic of all rights of humanity. Today we're very, very overjoyed. The first thing that I did when I hung up the phone was I wept because for 27 months, when you lose lifelong friends and you're drained financially, you're drained emotionally, that is a very emotional time to know that the highest court in the state of Louisiana said you were right on everything from establishment to assembly to free speech to free exercise. Tremendous wording in here. This is going to stand, attorney said, we don't know if it'll stand forever, how long forever is, but this is going to stand. And because of this, these great Supreme Court justices have opened a floodgate of other litigation against the executive branches across America. And we say to God be the glory. He's given us the strength to do this. It's a very great day for religion and for all civil liberties.
So
All right, and so that is some statements from the pastor Tony Spell over there at Life Tabernacle Church in Central Louisiana, who, again, friends, if you've not heard the big, incredible, and awesome news, has won. He was victorious in his fight against Governor John Bel Edwards of the state of Louisiana in fighting off a 4.5-year potential prison sentence for having the audacity to keep his church open during COVID. The mandates have been ruled unconstitutional by the highest court in the state of Louisiana. Pastor Spell is free from all charges and fines, and his congregation, at least for now, is safe from this persecution from the state government that has been coming down. Of course, greater persecutions do exist. I don't want to belittle the persecutions happening in Saudi Arabia and China and places like that where people are dying, but this was, I think, a form of a form of religious persecution in the Western world, excuse me. And I am very glad to have seen it defeated. There is one more story here I want to talk about. It is also involving the state of Louisiana, and we're going to pivot for the last 13 minutes of the show to abortion. Louisiana lawmakers have decided to drop the murder charge for abortions. For those of you who may not know, I have not been reporting on this, so you would not be getting this information from me. I have reported on it, I think, once, but I haven't been keeping up with it as much as I've been keeping up with, like, for example, Pastor Spell. But there was a law in Louisiana that I don't know what exactly they have there. I don't know if it's unicameral or bicameral, but I'm pretty sure it's bicameral. But regardless, their state legislature, they were battling out, right, a law to have greater restrictions on the act of abortion, especially in light of what's been going on in the Supreme Court. The law did actually include a provision to charge the mothers who had gotten abortions with murder, which is what made it incredibly controversial and why a lot of people have been talking about it, why a lot of you may have even heard about it, despite the fact that you certainly wouldn't have been hearing about it from me, because like I said, I had my attention elsewhere. Which is probably a error on my part. If I was probably doing these watchdogs more consistently, the way I have been the last couple of weeks, then likely I wouldn't have had this pitfall. So I apologize for that. But nonetheless, well, that provision to charge the women with murder has been dropped. That is developing as of today, I believe. Might have been yesterday that they had actually decided. In fact, I think it must have been yesterday because today is a Saturday. I don't think they would have been in session on a Saturday. So it must have been yesterday. But nonetheless, we're going to read over this article here again, so it'll actually let us know. But basically wanted to give you guys some updates on that, give some updates on my opinions on the whole matter. And of course, for those of you who don't know what this Louisiana law is, give you some updates on where the country is moving in certain places. Obviously, this is a state-by-state thing. If Roe v. Wade is repealed, which it appears we'll get an answer to that in June, excuse me. But if Roe v. Wade is appealed, it does not mean that abortion throughout the country is illegal. It simply means that the states have the right to make their own abortion laws. Realistically speaking, I think we'll only see probably anywhere from 5 to 10 states that actually make abortion illegal. Some states have laws on the books which already mandate that abortion be illegal, but nobody has ever bothered to repeal them because the laws have been unenforceable because of Roe v. Wade. So, there could be some people even moving backwards in that regard. Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Idaho, I think Wyoming and South Dakota have very strict anti-abortion laws, but likely no more than 10 states, in my personal opinion, will actually end up passing this. That said, let's go ahead and read a little bit here about what's going on in Louisiana. We'll make this quick because I want to get out of here in the 10 minutes that get us up to an hour. By the way, I see Kevin's biblical discussions and rebuke and reprove and Jamie Russell are all also here. And shalom to you all. Thank you for being here. If you are here, please remember to like and share the video. If you enjoy it, please consider subscribing if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time we go live. And yeah, thank you guys all very much for being here. Remember, again, any questions, tag me at the Synagogue News. If I find any, we'll answer them at the end. Let's get right into this. So, this is Associated Press. Kevin McGill is the original writer. I think Associated Press is not actually its own website. I think they collect from other websites. So I'm not 100% sure what the original source of this is, but nonetheless, Kevin McGill wrote it. No more murder charge for women in Louisiana abortion bill. Again, no more murder charge for women in Louisiana abortion bill. From New Orleans, the sponsor of a bill that would have subjected Louisiana women to murder charges for having abortions abruptly pulled the proposal from debate Thursday night after House members voted 65-26 to totally revamp the legislation, eliminating the criminal penalties. So, it's exactly what it sounds like. They took this to the legislature for a vote. Looks like their House, I knew they were bicameral. I think Virginia is the only unicameral I'm almost positive actually that Virginia is the only unicameral legislature in the country. I could be wrong about that. Maybe somebody fact check me on that, but nonetheless, that really has nothing to do with what we're talking about, anyways. But yeah, so this guy he proposes it, and they go to vote for it in the state house. There, the state house overwhelmingly voted no. Let's revamp it to eliminate these penalties for women. And he decided to pull it as a result. So that's the update that we are currently at this time. The controversial bill would have ventured farther against abortion than lawmakers' efforts in any other state. It would have made women who ended their pregnancies subject to criminal homicide prosecutions. Quote, excuse me, quote, this is a thorny political question, but we all know that it is actually very simple. Abortion is murder, end quote. Representative Danny McCormick, a Republican from Oil City, proclaimed as he opened the debate. He noted that a majority of Louisiana lawmakers in the heavily Republican legislature say they are anti-abortion, and briefly chided those abortion opponents who also opposed the bill. Quote, we're faltering and trying to explain it away, end quote. And that is the very interesting thing about all this, right? Louisiana's legislature is indeed overwhelmingly Republican. Again, this is an area in the Bible Belt, right? It's considered to be amongst the most religious places, specifically evangelical Christian places in the entire world, right? The fundamentalist Christianity in the South is realistically speaking comparable to fundamentalist Islam in the Middle East, in that it has that great an influence, not in that they are both the same. I think obviously I am a fundamentalist Christian, right? I don't think that we're the same as what they try to do over there in Saudi Arabia. But my point is the kind of influence you see Islam having in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in Oman, that's the same kind of influence you see Christianity having in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, or at least it has been for some time. I don't know, if that's necessarily 100% accurate at the moment. But just to give you an idea of the exact numbers, I just pulled it up here. 68 of the 105 members of the Louisiana House of Representatives are Republican, compared to 34 Democrats and 3 independents. So they double the number of Democrats. And with the 3 independent, by the way, I would imagine that at least one of those, I don't know who any of the 3 are, so I could be wrong about this. But considering it's in Louisiana, I would imagine at least one of those is probably a conservative independent who is actually independent of the Republicans because he's more conservative than them. That's a very common thing that we find in highly conservative areas. For example, Ammon Bundy actually dropped out of the Republican run for governor here in Idaho and decided to run as an independent. I personally disagree with that, but I'm still going to vote for him anyway. He's the best candidate, by the way, Ammon Bundy for 2022 in the state of Idaho, if you happen to live here. definitely consider it. That said, it's a common thing, right? If you're in a lefty kind of area, then you're going to have independents who are independent because they're left of the Democratic Party. And if you're in a right wing area, you're going to have people who are independent because they're right of the Republican Party. It's just kind of the way it works, right? So I'm sure at least one of those three is even a highly conservative kind of person. Could be wrong about that, but the point there being anti-abortion conservatism, at least allegedly, is the overwhelming uh, percentage of people in the Idaho, or not Idaho, excuse me, Louisiana legislature. Quote, this is a thorny political. Hang on, sorry, I just read that. Just read this whole paragraph, so let's go down. But McCormick's measure has drawn increasingly strong opposition from many anti-abortion stalwarts. Governor John Bell Edwards, an anti-abortion Democrat, said he would veto it. Louisiana Right to Life, the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the National Right to Life Committee were among the prominent anti-abortion opponents of the measure. Those are some big names, right? Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. I mean, Louisiana is one of the most Catholic areas in all of North America. It's right up there with Quebec and Mexico, right? Very, very Catholic because it has a very prominent French history, right? In fact, the name Louisiana itself is French. In fact, New Orleans is named after the city Orleans, right? It was an area that was all part of the French Empire and was actually given to the United States after an 1803 purchase known as the Louisiana Purchase, where a famous Napoleon Bonaparte sold the land to our famous president, Thomas Jefferson. It's actually one of those really cool sort of interlinkings of historical figures or synchronisms, I guess. I don't know what the word to use is, but it's cool is my point. Getting off on a tangent, the point is there's a whole lot of Catholic influence in the state of Louisiana. So that's a big group, right? Louisiana Right to Life. We all know Right to Life. This is specifically the Louisiana chapter, but Right to Life is one of the biggest organizations in the entire country. And indeed, their national conference, National Right to Life Committee, were also among those who were criticizing this bill. I believe March for Life, the annual march in Washington, D.C. Could be wrong about this, but I believe they are, if not directed by Right to Life, they are at least very strongly linked with them. I'm fairly certain. I'll have to double check on that. But nonetheless, by the way, Jamie Russell says in the live chat, some Louisiana independents, or at least one, Roy Darrell Adams, is considered a moderate Baptist. So that does kind of go a little bit to what I'm saying, though I think he might be, if he considers himself a moderate Baptist, perhaps he's left of the Republicans but right of the Democrats. That could be something. Nonetheless, appreciate you, Jamie, for providing some information in the live chat to help out here. That's actually like incredibly useful. I very much appreciate that. Edwards, a devout Catholic, a shocker, declared prosecuting women for abortion absurd. Real quickly, let me explain my little comment there of shocker. In my opinion, Catholicism is essentially a false religion, right? I'm an evangelical Christian. I believe that Catholicism is a false religion. And I believe it is no coincidence that when you look at some people like, for example, Joe Biden, John Bell Edwards, Nancy Pelosi, Sonia Sotomayor, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cardi B, Mia Khalifa, I'm not surprised that these people are Catholic, right? The Catholic Church has been moving in a incredibly progressive manner over the last really 70 years, since the 1940s. And so it is no shock to me at all to find progressive politicians and people who are on the progressive side culturally, which is why I mentioned Cardi B and Mia Khalifa, right, being Catholic. Not a surprise at all. I don't know if that's offensive to say, but I think that realistically, honestly, I think even the traditionalist Catholics would have to conclude I'm right, right? I mean, the church has been moving in a way that is not in favor of, but more in favor of progressive views on sexuality, marriage, abortion, evolution, etc. Right? And so to see individual Catholics who are progressive overwhelmingly dotting the political landscape, the music landscape, the landscape of actors, the cultural landscape as a whole, it's just not shocking to me. Right? What would be shocking is to see a whole bunch of oneness Pentecostals like that, or a bunch of Mormons up there like that, because they are not, as far as their churches are concerned. Well, I guess Mormons kind of moving in the direction of being progressive, but oneness Pentecostals will stick with them, right? Not progressive at all, right? Very traditional views of marriage, very traditional views on abortion, very traditional views on sexuality. So am I expecting to see a oneness Pentecostal politician, actor, something like that, who is going down, the path of progressive politics or progressive cultural influence? No, I'm not. That's an idea that would be weird to me. I would not expect to see them like that. Catholics, on the other hand, that's precisely where their church is going. I mean, Pope Francis is a perfect example of that, right? He's like the most progressive church leader potentially in the entire world. I say potentially because the leaders of, like, for example, the Presbyterian Church in America, definitely pretty progressive. But nonetheless, it's not shocking, is my point. It's not shocking. So just wanted to point that out. I'm not anti-Catholic in the sense that I'm like, that people are anti-Semitic, but I am anti-Catholic in the sense that I think it's a false religion, and I think that on the battlefield that is the culture war and the politics war, I do consider them a political adversary. But yeah, I mean, do with that information what you will, right? McCormick had just as strongly disagreed, saying a woman who has an abortion should be in the same legal position as a woman who takes the life of a child after birth. Quote, when I give equal protection to the unborn, that's the possibility, end quote, he said in a Wednesday evening phone interview. Now, I've thought about this a lot, considering how I view this issue, because there is an initial amount of wanting to be sympathetic, right? Of wanting to offer a hand of some sort of help to anybody I can, and I still think that that's the right way to go about these kinds of things. The thing is, I don't see how you can get out of this. I don't see how you can get out of the following logic. Okay, abortion is murder. To indirectly, or even directly, but in other words, to be involved in a murder in such a way where you're not actually killing the person but are still responsible is conspiracy to murder and accessory to murder. And therefore, if a woman knowingly brings her child to an abortionist, the abortionist is the one who gets the higher penalty because he's the one who actually committed the crime of murder. But I don't see how that's any different than like driving somebody to be, offed by some hitman or something like that. That does seem to me to be like, it just doesn't make any sense logically speaking to say that those aren't the same crime. They are the same crime. If you genuinely believe that it's abortion, or that it's murder, excuse me, then you genuinely believe that taking the victim to a designated area specifically for the purpose of being murdered. I mean, at bare minimum, that's got to be accessory to murder, right? If not conspiracy to commit murder, which I think is actually more accurate. This guy actually says it would be murder itself. I don't think that's actually accurate. I think it would have to be something like conspiracy, because I think the murder, legally speaking, you can only charge somebody with murder if they actually committed the act of killing. So I think everybody else would be conspiracy to commit murder. But I don't understand how you can get out of that. It seems to me utterly absurd to say that, excuse me, that's not an option that's on the table when it comes to women who get abortions. And the interesting thing about this actually is, believe it or not, the person who made me think most about this was former President Donald Trump, because he said that he thought that there should be, it was in 2016 when he was still running, he said that he thought there should be a smaller but still existing criminal charge for the woman in the situation. And I had just never really considered that. I had always thought, well, of course, you put the abortionist in prison. In fact, I think you could argue that they should get the exact same penalty that you would get in any other murder. And in fact, I would argue that. But I just never thought about it before. And I just kind of continued thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it some more. And eventually came to the conclusion that, much as I don't like this guy, he's totally right. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it either is murder or it isn't, right? Like, there's no in between on this issue. You either don't think that an abortion is a murder, in which case none of this is relevant at all. They should be able to do it whenever the hell they feel like. Or you do believe it's a murder, in which case it's a crime, like an actual crime against another ontologically separate human being. I don't know. It's weird what people call radical these days, because to me that's just being consistent. But at any rate, my point is I agree with this bill as it was originally stated. I'm kind of disappointed to see that it's not going to be originally stated this way, or that it's not going to continue to be stated this way. Excuse me. Supporters of the bill were adamant. Scores of them gathered at the Capitol to pray and show support. As the group watched from the House balcony, as the group watched from the House balcony as the bill was pulled, one shouted, "Shame." I bet that was Nicholas. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Oh, man. He totally would, though. The House had not yet started debating the controversial legislation when the building was temporarily evacuated Thursday after the Speaker interrupted proceedings and said an unknown, unclaimed package had been found in the Capitol's Memorial Hall, a gathering area between House and Senate chambers. That's interesting. I had not heard about that. I wonder if that was if they actually found anything in there. Jamie says he did. I heard it. That's funny. Anyways, I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm interested in what actually ended up occurring with that, because it sounds like what they're trying to imply is there was a bomb threat, but I feel like there would have been people talking about a bomb threat at the Louisiana State Capitol. So I'm gonna have to excuse me. I'm very interested in reading about that. Came on a day when legislation was already moving slowly as lawmakers tried to find a compromise on McCormick's bill. The House recessed for more than an hour while lawmakers broke into groups behind closed doors to discuss the legislation. Pending at the time was the amendment by Representative Alan Seabaugh. The Shreveport, I don't know how to actually say the name of this particular town. I'm sorry. I think it's Shreveport, but Shreveport also looks like it could be accurate. Anyways, the Shreveport Republican is an anti-abortion stalwart, but his amendment overhauled McCormick's bill, declaring the women would not face criminal penalties for abortion. It also allowed abortion to save the life of a pregnant woman, while it eliminated language in McCormick's original bill that appeared to make contraceptive drugs and at least some aspects of fertilization illegal. Now, this is now adding some other issues. So let me give my opinions here on this. First off, I do believe that it is, and Jamie has actually confirmed it is Shreveport. So thank you for confirming that. Jamie, you're just all sorts of help today. I by the way, I really do mean that. You're like helping me out a lot here, with the information you gave there on the Louisiana, all three of the representatives actually, and then also the name here. I appreciate you greatly. So when it comes to abortion to save the life of the mother, there is no reasonable pro-life advocate who disagrees with that. And I'm sorry to put it that way, but if you are forced to choose between losing one life and losing two, you choose to lose one every time. Not even a question. Well, I guess not every time. So to be fair, I guess I can think of some circumstances where, like, if you have two people on their deathbed versus a 5-year-old, I think you probably take the 5-year-old based off of the potential for life, right? But I have heard people try to argue against abortion for the for the sake of the life of the mother. That is not a pro-life position. It is contrary to a life position. Now, it is very important to understand that those are incredibly rare and that we are talking about a situation where you are literally being forced to choose: do you let both die, or do you let one of them die? Right? That's the kind of situation we're talking about here. If you can save a life, you do. Okay, right? That's, I think, a very reasonable assumption um on the part of the doctor, on the part of us as a society. And I don't believe this was controversial before Roe v. Wade. In other words, I think this was made controversial by the polarization of our culture. But it does seem to me like in the past, when abortion was illegal, this was not something that ever was, because um, nobody was ever considering it a morally wrong thing to choose to actually save one of the lives. And again, that is what you're talking about when it comes to threat to the mother's life. If you are in a situation where you are being forced to choose, they both die or the child dies, I mean, it's a simple math problem. It really is. It's a very unfortunate math problem. It sucks, but there's nothing you can do at that particular instance. So I do think that we do need to make sure abortion legislation is accounting for that one exception, because it is an important exception. That being said, you know, I'm sure that might have made some pro-choice people in the live chat happy, provided that there is any. Well, I guess there's at least a couple, more than a couple progressive people watch this channel. So I guess there's probably more than a couple, but nonetheless, I don't believe that there should be exceptions for rape and incest. Just so you know. So that, while that may have made you think, oh well, he's being a little bit reasonable from your perspective, allow me to be unreasonable from your perspective real quick, because that is the only exception I do believe exists. And again, it's because I just think that they don't have a choice. I think if you absolutely have to choose between saving one life and saving no lives, then you choose to save one life. It seems to me like it really boils down to that. If I'm wrong about that, somebody let me know why I'm wrong. Again, questions can be asked by tagging me. And also, if you guys are not watching this live, questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, and all that kind of stuff can be found in the live chat. Pending at the time was, and no, sorry, there was other stuff I wanted to comment on here as well. The other thing here about making contraceptive drugs illegal and in vitro fertilization illegal. So when it comes to contraceptive drugs, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. I don't actually think it's wise to take contraceptive drugs. I think there's probably just my opinion. For a lot of people, I think there's a lot of health issues. I think it messes with your ability to be fertile. I think it is potentially, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's serious risk of cancers with contraceptive drugs and stuff like that. So I'm not pro contraceptive drugs. I want to make sure I'm clear here. I am not, however, pro making contraceptive drugs illegal. That's not the state's job, frankly. Um, I don't believe that the state, I mean, really, the state should not be regulating anything that is not directly threatening to another person, I think. At least almost. I'm sure somebody somewhere, I can't think of one now. I'm sure somebody somewhere can think of an exception to that rule where the state is justified in passing a law and you're not directly victimizing somebody. But, call it a little bit too libertarian of me, but I just do not believe that the state has the right to be controlling the substances that we willingly put in our body, provided that they're not directly victimizing somebody else, right? Which I think is where you get into situations where, like for example, with heroin, the impact of heroin is so extreme that it's almost a given you will directly impact society in a malicious way, right? Um, and there's some argument even to be had there, but like when it comes to making contraceptive drugs illegal, and I'll even extend this, people wanting to extend the age to smoking so that you can't smoke till you're 21 or 25, or people saying that we should have illegal marijuana, or so on and so forth. I don't think that's the state's job. I take a pretty strong stance on that. In vitro fertilization, I have heard people say that they want in vitro fertilization to be illegal. I don't see why. I guess maybe it's never been properly explained to me. I'm not 100% sure how that process even works or what exactly it is. Um, so I'm not going to speak too much about it, but I'll say initially, in vitro fertilization seems to me like a good thing because it seems to me like it's a thing that would help people who can't have children actually have children, can't naturally have children, in other words. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Perhaps somebody can explain the whole process. Maybe I can just do more to research it. But um, in every element there, with the one exception of getting rid of this criminal penalty, I actually think that Sebah's bill is better. Um, but I think that's a big exception because I do believe in penalties for abortion. The amendment also stripped language from McCormick's bill widely regarded as blatantly unconstitutional, which was a declaration that any federal law, regulation, or court ruling that allows abortion is void, and that any judge who blocks enforcement of the bill's provisions could be impeached. Um, Now, this is an interesting one because I don't believe it is actually unconstitutional. Um, Maybe the state constitution in Louisiana, I guess I'm not sure. But as far as my knowledge of the United States Constitution, I don't know of anything in the United States Constitution that would say directly this kind of a bill would be unconstitutional. In fact, my interpretation of the 10th and 9th Amendments is pretty strongly uh, states' rights. I think that's what they're trying to communicate. My understanding is that the idea is if something is not directly addressed in the United States Constitution as a power given to the state, the federal state, I mean, then the local state, meaning the actual states, Idaho and Utah and so on, right? They have the say and the people. So the quintessential example I think of this is drug legislation, right? Regardless of how you feel about any drug, there should not be any federal drug laws, period. They are all unconstitutional. Every single one of them should go away. If your local state would like to make heroin, meth, cocaine, etc. illegal, they have that right. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of states would do that if we had a federalist system being, well, if we had a true federalist system. We do still have a federalist system, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. But the federal government, constitutionally speaking, has no right whatsoever to pass any drug laws, period. Right? It's just not their job, frankly. This is kind of one of those things that, in my opinion, has been solved not by the precedent of courts, but by the precedent of states doing exactly this. In other words, when you had Washington and Colorado legalize pot, effectively what they were saying is, hey, the Constitution doesn't actually give the government the right to make, the federal government, excuse me, the right to make drug laws, and so we're just going to nullify that and do whatever the hell we feel like. And it kind of sounds to me like that's the same thing that this McCormick bill is saying. Hey, the Constitution doesn't say anything at all about abortion, and the Constitution does say that you don't have a right to make a law about something not directly addressed in the Constitution. So, take a hike. And to be honest with you, a big part of the reason why I use the pot example is because I have a little bit of admiration for progressive states on pot. I have a little bit of admiration for their willingness to just tell the federal government, sorry, you in what army, frankly, right? Because that's exactly what should be happening. We have just as much right to say we're just going to do whatever we want on abortion and you can't stop us, as California does to say we're just going to do whatever we want on marijuana and you can't stop us. Like literally, like the arguments for doing either or are identical. The state has that right. The federal government does not, period. Read your 9th and 10th Amendments. And I know sometimes there is federal raids in Washington and Oregon and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Occasionally it does happen. But the states do it anyway. They're just like, yeah, hey, we're going to allow people to sell weed and you're not going to do anything to stop us. And I don't understand why conservative states don't feel the exact same way. Does the Constitution say that abortion's legal? No. Then we're going to make it illegal. And I don't care what you have to say about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I have no problem with what McCormick's bill said, basically, is my point. Like, you absolutely, absolutely don't, have the what's the word? Obligation. That's what I'm looking for. To listen to every law just because it's a federal law. The Constitution is very clear that if a law is not, if a power is not specifically delegated to the federal government by the Constitution, then it goes to the people in the states. Period. End of the talk. We have a Constitution for a reason. Anyways. Quote, we can't grant ourselves the power to order a court to rule future acts unconstitutional, end quote, Seba argued. Now that itself is true. In the sense that like we can't say that you have to do it. Well, I don't know. I guess it sounds to me like what he's trying to say is you can't like have a law well, you know what? Actually, I don't even know if I agree with this now that it's coming out of my mouth. I guess you do have the right to have a law dictate what the court says because that's what the job of the court is, right? Is to make sure the law is being followed to the letter. So yeah, you know what? Never mind. I actually don't think I agree with the statement by Seba. Anyways, the amendment mirrors a pending Senate bill aimed at tightening up Louisiana abortion laws that would go into effect if Roe v. Wade is overturned. McCormick, as the sponsor, is unlikely to advance it in the House, but the Senate version can still advance. Really quickly, let's see. Nicholas says, in vitro involves creating humans in a lab, cryogenically freezing them implanting some of them, and never implanting the majority of them. It tends to result in far more murder than reproduction. I only condone cryogenically freezing humans for the purpose of saving those individuals. I don't condone using those humans in order to please other humans. All right, I'm gonna have to look into that. I guess that does sound a little weird. Yeah, and I appreciate that because, like I said earlier, I'm kind of just ignorant on what exactly in vitro fertilization is. So I appreciate you providing the information there. It does sound like if what Nicholas here has described is accurate, then a far greater number of those embryos would actually be ultimately discarded than used, which would effectively mean if those embryos have already been fertilized, that would be a far more number of lives terminated than actually going full to term. Yeah, so I appreciate that information. I'm again going to look a little bit deeper into this. McCormick's bill, introduced in March, had drawn intense scrutiny in light of last week's leak of a draft of a U.S. Supreme Court opinion indicating the High Court is preparing to overturn decisions upholding a constitutional right to abortion. You can't uphold something that doesn't exist. They created a right to abortion. They did not actually uphold a right to abortion, right? There's a big difference. There was no indication yet that lawmakers in other states are taking up similar legislation. In Idaho, woot woot, Republican State Representative Heather Scott has proposed prosecuting women who get abortions, but a committee chairman said Friday he would not allow it. I actually sort of kind of know Heather Scott, actually. Not in a seriously robust fashion, but we have spoken before via Facebook, and we are actually friends on social media. Great girl, actually. One of the best leaders that we have here. Quote, there are still reasonable people in the legislature who are going to ensure that extreme bills like that are not going to get a hearing, Brett Crane said. And on the flip side of what I just said, not only do I not know Brett Crane at all, but also thoroughly disagree with the idea that he is a good dude. I don't like him at all. He's a rhino of all rhinos, if one has existed. Let me tell you. And his major proposal, right? Like the one that's actually been popular for him, it was to ban birth control. So he's not down with making murder prosecuted as murder, but he is down with banning birth control, which I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's like a completely ridiculous position to have as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, Louisiana already has laws on the book criminalizing abortion, including a trigger law ensuring that it will be a crime if the Supreme Court reverses the Roe v. Wade decision, the 1973 ruling establishing abortion rights. Now, that's actually more accurate to say when it says establishing abortion rights, because they weren't established already. The Constitution doesn't establish them. So the article kind of caught itself in a little bit of honesty there. I appreciate it. Statutes appear to exempt women from prosecution, although some abortion rights advocates have suggested they need tightening. McCormick has said that existing laws are inadequate to give fetuses equal protection under the law, and I think that that is accurate. And it's interesting too. If you murder a pregnant woman in the state of Louisiana, it is a double homicide. And they also want to make it so abortionists themselves, at least a lot of people do, and I'm amongst their number, abortionists themselves are prosecuted for murder. And if both of those things are true, if I kill a pregnant woman and am charged with double homicide, or if I kill a woman's baby and am charged with homicide by abortion, it doesn't really make any sense to say, hey, she brought me that baby and is not guilty of a crime. I genuinely don't get it. And I would like to actually have a conversation with a pro-lifer who disagrees with charges for women or charges for abortionists in general. Because I kind of want to pick your brain, if I'm being honest. I don't understand. To me, the logic is so thoroughly clear that the only thing that could lead you, in my opinion, to conclude you shouldn't charge women is a level of sympathy for the women. And the thing is, I share your sympathy, but I don't agree. In other words, I share the sympathy in that I want to see people. I think that a lot of times people commit morally wrong acts because life is frankly terrible and all of us are awful, and they may even feel like they need to. And I can sympathize with that. I mean, have you ever seen the show Criminal Minds, right? Very often you'll have a show or an episode of the show where the unsub or murderer is somebody who has like a very sympathetic life, like they were abused or they're mentally incapable, or they've been just thoroughly destroyed in a marriage or something like that. And I can greatly sympathize with the person. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't go to prison, right? Like those aren't the same thing. I have a good friend who is currently in prison for domestic abuse. And given the context of the situation, she's not a peach, and you can sympathize with losing your temper in that way. The thing is, though, is you still can't do it. It's still not right. It's evil to lay your hands on a woman. And he's in prison, and he should be. And despite my great love for him, and despite the fact that I still witness to him, and despite the fact that I wish to see him rehabilitated, he deserves the punishment. Right? Like, I don't know. I'm ranting at this point. And I want to go ahead and get off because we've already been going over the allotted time that I usually give myself, which is an hour, and by quite a minute, actually. 30 of them to be exact. So I'm going to go ahead and end there. But the point is just saying, like, if sympathy is your reason, well, I share your sympathies. So how come I don't share your conclusion? Perhaps it's because you don't share my sympathies with the unborn. I'm just saying. Just saying. Anyways, friends, if you like this video, please do consider liking and sharing this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. Please consider sharing this to the different social media platforms which you frequent. Get on Gab, get on Parler, get on Minds. You can also follow your boy at the Synagogue on any of those. And by the way, I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. I would also like to recommend liking us on Rumble at the Synagogue. They won't allow me to change the name to the Synagogue News yet, but I do only post my political content on there. And of course, it's a backup just in case we ever end up getting canceled over here. Also, want to let you guys know that if you are interested in helping turn this into a career, getting this content out there. If you think that this is good content, good speaking points that people need to be talking about this, you can actually help me do that by giving either a one-time donation to my PayPal, just posted in the description, or a subscription donation of any amount you choose to my Patreon, also there in the live chat, or at least it should be popping up here in a second. I appreciate anybody who does those things. I think at some point I need to just get somebody who can continuously post for me links in the live chat. So, that way we can just continuously get these things out. At any rate, appreciate you guys tremendously. I want to ask you guys to be watchdogs. Want to ask you guys the question: in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise?